The blizzard had taken everything from her, except the will to keep breathing. Though some mornings Jane Kendall wondered why she bothered with even that anymore. She pressed her pale hand against the frosted window of the boarding house room, watching the December snow fall thick over Deadwood, South Dakota. It was 1877, and winter had settled into the Black Hills with a vengeance that matched the emptiness in her chest. 6 months ago, she had arrived in this rough mining town with her father and younger brother, full of hope that the gold rush would change their fortunes. Then the fever came. First it took her brother Thomas, only 14 years old, shivering and delirious in a makeshift bed. 2 weeks later, her father followed, and Jane found herself utterly alone in a town that had no mercy for solitary women. The cold had seeped into her bones, but it was more than the December frost. It was the cold of loneliness, of grief so profound she could barely lift herself from bed most mornings. She had sold nearly everything they owned just to pay for the cramped room and enough food to survive. Her dresses hung loose on her frame now, and the mirror showed a gaunt face with hollowed cheeks and eyes that seemed too large, too haunted. Jane pulled her thin shawl tighter and turned away from the window. She needed to find work, but every establishment in Deadwood had turned her away. The saloons wanted girls willing to do more than serve drinks, and the few respectable businesses had no use for a grieving woman who could barely speak without her voice cracking. She had tried taking and mending, but her hands shook too much from the cold and hunger to make neat stitches. A knock at her door made her jump. She opened it to find Mrs. Patterson, the boarding house owner, her round face set in stern lines. "Rent's due tomorrow, Miss Kendall," the older woman said without preamble. "I've been patient, but I cannot run a charity." "I know," Jane whispered. "I'm trying to find work. I just need a few more days. You have until tomorrow evening. After that, I'll have to let the room to someone who can pay." Mrs. Patterson's expression softened slightly. "I'm sorry, dear. Times are hard for everyone." When the door closed, Jane sank onto the narrow bed and buried her face in her hands. She had perhaps $3 to her name. Not enough for rent, barely enough for food. The winter seemed determined to grind her down to nothing, and she was too tired to fight it anymore. That afternoon, desperate beyond measure, she wrapped herself in every layer she owned and ventured into the bitter cold. Main Street was a chaos of mud, melting snow, and wooden planks that served as makeshift walkways. Men in heavy coats and wide-brimmed hats trudged past, their breath making white clouds in the frigid air. Jane made her way to the general store, hoping against hope that they might need help. The store was warm inside, heated by a pot-bellied stove that made her fingers tingle painfully as blood flow returned. The owner, Mr. Hendricks, was helping a customer, and Jane waited, trying not to look as desperate as she felt. "Help you, miss?" Mr. Hendricks finally asked, his tone polite but wary. "I was wondering if you might need any help," Jane said, forcing herself to speak clearly. "I can stock shelves, keep accounts clean, anything." He shook his head slowly. "I'm sorry, but I've got all the help I need." "My nephew works with me." Jane nodded, blinking back the tears that threatened. "Thank you anyway." She was turning to leave when a voice stopped her. "You looking for work?" Jane turned to see the customer Mr. Hendricks had been helping. He was tall, perhaps in his mid-20s, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes the color of creek water in summer. His face was weathered in the way of men who spent their lives outdoors, but there was a gentleness in his expression that made something in her chest tighten. "Yes," she managed. "Do you know of anything?" "Might. My name's Aaron Taggart. I've got a ranch about 5 miles outside town. My housekeeper left last week to move back east with her daughter, and I've been managing on my own, but the place is getting away from me." He studied her for a moment, and she felt acutely aware of how thin and ragged she must look. "You got experience with housework, cooking?" "Yes," Jane said quickly. "My mother taught me before she passed. I can cook, clean, mend. I'm a hard worker, Mr. Taggart." "It's not fancy work," Aaron continued. "The ranch house is comfortable enough, but it's just me and my two ranch hands. We're not much for polite company, and the work would be daily. I could offer room and board plus $20 a month." $20. It was more than generous. Jane felt hope flicker in her chest for the first time in weeks. "I would be very grateful for the opportunity," she said. Aaron nodded. "I've got business in town today, but I'll be heading back tomorrow morning. Can you be ready by 8? I'll pick you up wherever you're staying." "The Patterson boarding house on Cedar Street." "I know it. 8 o'clock then." He tipped his hat. "See you tomorrow, Miss Kendall, Jane Kendall, Miss Kendall." His smile was brief but warm, and then he was gathering his purchases and heading out into the cold. Jane stood motionless for a moment, hardly daring to believe her luck. Then she hurried back to the boarding house to tell Mrs. Patterson she would have the room only one more night. That evening, as she packed her few belongings into a worn carpet bag, Jane felt something she had not experienced in months. Not quite hope, but perhaps the distant cousin of it. A chance. A possibility that she might survive this brutal winter after all. She did not sleep well, afraid she might oversleep and miss her opportunity. But when the first gray light of dawn crept through her window, she was already dressed in her least ragged dress, her hair pinned neatly, her bag packed and ready. At 8 o'clock precisely, Aaron Taggart pulled up in a sturdy wagon driven by two strong horses. He climbed down to help her with her bag, his movements easy and practiced. "Morning, Miss Kendall. You ready?" "Yes. Thank you again for this opportunity, Mr. Taggart." "Let's see how you feel after a week of cooking for ranch hands," he said with a slight smile. "They eat like they're hollow inside." The ride out of Deadwood took them through snow-covered hills, dotted with pine trees heavy with white. The sky was a pale, clear blue, the kind that came with bitter cold. Jane wrapped her shawl tight and tried not to shiver too obviously. "You been in Deadwood long?" Aaron asked after a while. "Since June. I came with my father and brother." She hesitated, then decided honesty was better than evasion. "They both died. Fever. I'm sorry." The words were simple, but his tone carried genuine sympathy. "That's a hard thing." "Yes. You got other family?" "Not anymore. It was just the three of us." Aaron was quiet for a moment. "Well, you've got work now. That's something." They rode in companionable silence for a while. Despite her nervousness, Jane found herself studying him from the corner of her eye. He had strong hands on the reins, steady and sure. His profile was clean-lined, his jaw shadowed with stubble. There was something solid about him, something that made her feel, for the first time in months, that perhaps the world was not entirely hostile. The ranch came into view around a bend in the trail. It was larger than she had expected, with a main house built of sturdy logs, a barn, several outbuildings and corrals where horses moved restlessly. Smoke curled from the chimney, and the whole place had an air of being well maintained despite Aaron's claims of it getting away from him. "It's beautiful," Jane said softly. "It's home," Aaron replied. "My father built the main house 20 years ago. He and my mother are both gone now, but I've tried to keep it up the way they would have wanted." He helped her down from the wagon, and she noticed how carefully he supported her elbow, as if aware she was more fragile than she wanted to appear. The front door opened directly into a large main room that served as both kitchen and living space. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, and Jane could see doorways leading to what must be bedrooms. Everything was clean enough, but there was a bachelor untidiness to it that spoke of men living without a woman's touch. "Your room's through here," Aaron said, leading her to a small bedroom off the kitchen. It had a narrow bed, a dresser, a washstand, and a window that looked out toward the mountains. "It's not much, but it's warm and private." "It's wonderful," Jane said, and meant it. After months in the cramped boarding house room, this felt like luxury. "Take your time settling in. I'll introduce you to the hands at lunch. They're out checking on the cattle now." He paused in the doorway. "Jane, I want to be clear about something. You're here as my housekeeper, nothing more. You'll be treated with respect, and if anyone makes you uncomfortable, you tell me immediately." "Understood." The knot of anxiety she had been carrying loosened slightly. "Understood. Thank you, Mr. Taggart." "Aaron's fine when it's just us. Mr. Taggart makes me feel old." After he left, Jane unpacked her few belongings and then explored the kitchen. The pantry was well stocked, and she found everything she needed to make a substantial lunch. As she worked, kneading dough for biscuits and preparing a stew from dried beef and vegetables, she felt something in her chest begin to thaw. The warmth of the kitchen, the simple, purposeful work, the knowledge that she had a place to sleep and would not go hungry, all of it combined to push back the darkness that had been consuming her. At noon, Aaron returned with 2 ranch hands. They stomped snow off their boots before entering, and Jane tried not to be nervous as Aaron made introductions. "This is Billy and Sam. Boys, this is Miss Kendall. She'll be keeping house for us, so mind your manners." Billy was young, probably no more than 20, with a round, friendly face. Sam was older, weathered and lean, with eyes that had seen hard years. Both removed their hats and nodded politely. "Pleased to meet you, madam," Billy said. "Miss," Sam added. They ate with the focused intensity of men who worked hard physically, and Jane was gratified to see them go back for seconds, and then thirds. When Billy complimented her biscuits, calling them the best he had tasted since his mother's, she felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire. As the days passed, Jane fell into a rhythm. She rose early to make breakfast, packed lunches for the men when they would be out on the range all day, and prepared hearty dinners. She cleaned, mended clothes and linens, and gradually began to put her own touches on the house. A vase of dried flowers on the table, curtains washed and rehung so they were crisp and clean. Small things, but they made the place feel more like a home, and slowly, almost without her noticing, the winter began to lose its grip on her soul. Aaron was a good employer, considerate and fair. He worked as hard as his men, rising before dawn and often not finishing until well after dark. But he always took time to ask how she was managing, if she needed anything from town. Sometimes, in the evenings, he would sit by the fire and they would talk while she mended or knitted. She learned that he was 26, that he had learned ranching from his father, that he loved this land with a fierce devotion. He had been engaged once, to a girl from Cheyenne, but she had decided ranch life was too hard and married a banker instead. He told the story without bitterness, but Jane could hear the old hurt beneath the words. "I think she made the right choice," Aaron said one evening, staring into the fire. "This life isn't for everyone. It's hard and lonely, and you're always at the mercy of weather and cattle prices and 100 things you cannot control." "But you love it," Jane said. He looked at her surprised. "Yes, how did you know?" "I can see it in the way you talk about the land. The way you look at the mountains in the morning." Aaron smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. "You're observant, Jane Kendall." She felt her cheeks warm and bent her head over her mending. Something was growing between them, something she was afraid to name, because naming it might make it disappear. Christmas came, and Jane threw herself into preparations. She made a feast with roasted chicken, potatoes, carrots, fresh bread, and a dried apple pie that made Billy actually groan with pleasure. Aaron had brought back a small pine tree from the hills, and they decorated it with strings of popcorn and paper ornaments Jane made from old newspapers. It was the first Christmas since her father and brother died, and Jane expected to spend it drowning in grief. But instead, sitting around the table with Aaron, Billy, and Sam, listening to them trade stories and laugh, she felt something she had thought lost forever: a sense of belonging. A family, however makeshift. Aaron gave her a gift, a warm woolen shawl in deep blue that must have cost far more than he could easily afford. She had knitted him a scarf from yarn she had carefully unraveled from an old sweater, and when he wrapped it around his neck and declared it perfect, she felt tears prick her eyes. That night, after Billy and Sam had retired to the bunkhouse, Aaron walked Jane to her room as had become his habit. "Thank you for today," he said quietly. "It was the best Christmas I've had in years." "Thank you for giving me a place to be," Jane replied. "I don't know where I would be if you had not offered me this job. I'm glad I did." He reached out almost hesitantly and took her hand. His palm was warm and calloused against hers. "You've brought something back to this house, Jane. Light, maybe, or warmth. Whatever it is, I'm grateful for it." She looked up at him, at his honest face and gentle eyes, and felt her heart do something complicated in her chest. She wanted to tell him that he had saved her, that she had been drowning and he had pulled her to shore, but the words stuck in her throat, too large and frightening to release. "Good night, Aaron," she whispered instead. "Good night, Jane." But he did not release her hand immediately, and in that moment of prolonged contact, something unspoken passed between them. A recognition, a possibility. January brought more snow and bitter cold. The ranch work became harder, with frozen water troughs to break, cattle to bring down from the hills, and endless repairs to fences damaged by the weight of ice. Aaron came in each evening looking exhausted, and Jane took to having hot coffee and a warm meal ready no matter what time he arrived. One particularly brutal evening, he stumbled in nearly frozen, his lips blue and his hands so cold he could barely work his gloves off. Jane immediately made him sit by the fire and brought him blankets and hot coffee. "You should not have stayed out so long," she scolded, rubbing his hands between hers to restore circulation. "You could have frozen to death." "Had to get the cattle to shelter," Aaron said through chattering teeth. "Storm's getting worse." "And what good would you be to the cattle if you froze solid?" Jane demanded. She was surprised by the intensity of her fear, the way her heart had lurched when she saw how dangerously cold he was. Aaron looked at her, and something in his expression made her breath catch. "You worried about me, Jane." "Of course I was worried," she said, trying to sound matter-of-fact and failing. "What would I do if you died? I would be out of a job. That's the only reason." His voice was soft, almost teasing, but his eyes were serious. Jane looked down at their joined hands, at the way her small fingers wrapped around his larger ones. "No," she admitted quietly, "that's not the only reason." Aaron lifted one hand to her cheek, his touch gentle despite the roughness of his skin. "Jane, I need to tell you something. These past months, having you here, it's been more than just having a housekeeper. You've become important to me, more important than I probably should allow." Her heart was pounding so hard she was sure he must hear it. "Why should you not allow it?" "Because I don't want to take advantage. You came here needing work and a place to stay. I don't want you to feel obligated or pressured into anything because of that." Jane raised her eyes to meet his. "What if I don't feel pressured? What if I feel the same way?" The joy that flooded his face was almost painful to see. "Do you? Truly?" "Yes." The word came out barely above a whisper, but it carried all the truth in her heart. "You brought me back to life, Aaron. This winter, before I met you, I was so lost and cold and alone. I wanted to just disappear. but you gave me warmth and purpose and kindness. You made me want to live again, Jane." He said her name like a prayer, and then his lips were on hers, soft and warm and perfect. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, as if they were both afraid of breaking something precious. But then Jane leaned into him, her hands coming up to his chest and Aaron's arms wrapped around her, pulling her close. She could feel his heart beating against hers, strong and steady, and she thought that this right here, was what coming home felt like. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Aaron rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he said simply. "I think I've been falling in love with you since that first day in the general store when you looked so scared but so determined." "I love you too," Jane replied, and the words felt like magic, like speaking them made the world suddenly brighter and warmer despite the blizzard raging outside. They spent the rest of the evening curled together on the sofa, talking and kissing and making plans. Aaron wanted to marry her, wanted to make her his wife officially and permanently. Jane agreed without hesitation, her heart so full she thought it might burst. "We'll go to town as soon as the weather clears," Aaron said, playing with her hair. "Get a proper license, have the preacher marry us. I want everyone to know you're mine." "I'm already yours," Jane said softly. "I have been for weeks. I was just too frightened to admit it. No more being frightened. I've got you now, and I'm not letting go." The storm lasted 3 days, and they were 3 of the happiest days of Jane's life. Snowed in together, they existed in a bubble of newfound love and intimacy. Aaron helped her with kitchen chores, and she sat with him in the evenings while he did paperwork. They talked about everything and nothing, learning each other's histories and hopes and fears. Billy and Sam were delighted by the development. Billy actually whooped when Aaron announced they were engaged, and Sam smiled, a rare sight, and said he had known it was only a matter of time. When the storm finally broke, Aaron hitched up the wagon and drove Jane into Deadwood. The town looked different now, less hostile and cold. Or perhaps it was just that she was different, no longer alone and struggling but loved and secure. They stopped at the general store first, where Aaron bought her a simple gold band. It was not elaborate, but Jane loved it with all her heart. Then to the courthouse for the marriage license, and finally to the small church, where Reverend Morrison agreed to marry them that very afternoon. Jane stood in the church in her best dress, which Aaron had insisted on buying her despite her protests, and said her vows with a clear, strong voice. When Aaron slipped the ring on her finger and kissed her as his wife, she felt the last traces of winter's cold leave her soul. They spent their wedding night at a modest hotel in Deadwood, and Jane discovered that physical intimacy with the man she loved was nothing to fear and everything to cherish. Aaron was gentle and patient, mindful of her inexperience, and when they finally lay tangled together in the darkness, Jane felt complete in a way she never had before. "Happy?" Aaron asked, his lips against her hair. "So happy I'm afraid I'll wake up and find it was all a dream." "Not a dream. You're stuck with me now, Mrs. Taggart." "Good," Jane said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. They returned to the ranch the next day to find Billy and Sam had decorated the house with ribbons and made a somewhat lopsided cake to celebrate. The gesture touched Jane deeply, and she hugged both men, making Billy blush and even Sam look pleased. As winter slowly gave way to early spring, Jane settled into her new role as Aaron's wife. It was not so different from being his housekeeper in many practical ways, but emotionally, it was everything. She was no longer just working for a place to stay. This was her home. Aaron was her husband, and every day felt like a gift. In March, Jane realized she had missed her monthly courses. A visit to Doc Henderson in Deadwood confirmed what she suspected. She was pregnant. She told Aaron that evening, nervous despite knowing he would be thrilled. They were in their bedroom and she twisted her hands together, trying to find the right words. "Aaron, I have something to tell you." He looked up from pulling off his boots, his expression immediately concerned. "What's wrong? Are you sick?" "No, I'm not sick. I'm pregnant." The boot dropped from his hand and hit the floor with a thud. For a moment he just stared at her and Jane felt a flutter of worry. Then his face split into the widest grin she had ever seen. "Pregnant. We're going to have a baby." "Yes." She was smiling now too, relief flooding through her. Aaron crossed the room in 2 strides and swept her into his arms, spinning her around until she was dizzy and laughing. "A baby." "Jane, that's wonderful. That's the best news I've ever heard." He set her down carefully as if she might break and placed his hand reverently on her still flat stomach. "There's a baby in there. Our baby." "Our baby," Jane agreed, covering his hand with hers. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Jane had some morning sickness in the early months, but Aaron was attentive and caring, bringing her tea and crackers, rubbing her back when she felt queasy. As her belly grew, he became almost comically protective, not wanting her to lift anything heavy or overwork herself. "I'm pregnant, not made of glass," Jane protested one day when he insisted on carrying a basket of laundry for her. "You're carrying my child. I'm not taking any chances." His devotion made her love him even more if that was possible. She had come to Deadwood broken and alone, ready to give up on life. And now she had a husband who adored her and a baby on the way. The transformation was almost too miraculous to believe. Summer brought long, golden days and the demanding work of running the ranch. Billy and Sam worked tirelessly alongside Aaron, and Jane kept them all fed and comfortable. In the evenings, she and Aaron would sit on the porch, his hand on her swollen belly, feeling their child move and kick. "What should we name him?" Aaron asked one evening. "What if it's a girl?" "Then we'll name her after someone you love. What was your mother's name?" Aaron Taggart. "That's beautiful." "And if it's a boy?" Aaron thought for a moment. "My father's name was James. James Taggart Jr. I like that," Jane said softly. In September, on a warm afternoon that seemed to stretch forever, Jane went into labor. Aaron sent Billy racing for Doc Henderson while he and Sam did their best to keep Jane comfortable. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Aaron looked terrified, holding her hand and whispering encouragements. But finally, as the sun was setting and painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, their son was born. He came into the world screaming lustily, and when Doc Henderson placed him in Jane's arms, she wept with joy. "He's perfect," she whispered, studying the tiny red face. "He's beautiful," Aaron agreed, though his eyes were on Jane rather than the baby. "Just like his mother. Thank you, Jane. Thank you for this gift." They named him James, and he became the center of their world. Aaron was a devoted father, rocking the baby when he cried at night, making silly faces to coax out smiles, carrying him around the ranch to show him cattle and horses and wide open sky. Jane watched her husband with their son and felt her heart expand in ways she had not known were possible. This was family. This was love. This was everything she had lost and found again in ways more precious than before. The first year of James's life passed in a blur of sleepless nights and small miracles. His first smile, his first laugh, his first tentative steps. Billy and Sam were unofficial uncles, always ready to hold the baby or make him giggle. On their second wedding anniversary, Aaron surprised Jane with a new addition to the house. He had built her a room of her own, a small parlor where she could sew or read or just have a moment of peace when the demands of ranch life and motherhood became overwhelming. "You've given me so much," he said as he showed her the space, furnished with a comfortable chair, a small writing desk and shelves for books. "I wanted to give you something back." Jane hugged him tightly. "You've given me everything. You gave me life again when I had given up on living. And you gave me purpose beyond just surviving. You made this house a home. You made me whole." As the years passed, the ranch prospered. Aaron expanded the herd, built a new barn, and hired more hands as the work grew. Jane became known in Deadwood as a kind woman, always ready to help a neighbor, and the ranch house was often filled with friends and visitors. They had 2 more children, a daughter they named Alina after Jane's mother, and another son they called Thomas after Jane's lost brother. Each child was loved fiercely, raised in a home filled with laughter and security. Sometimes, on winter evenings when snow fell soft outside and the children were asleep, Jane would stand by the window and remember the woman she had been when she first came to Deadwood. Hollow and hopeless, barely surviving, seeing no future beyond the next frozen day. And then Aaron would come up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, and she would lean back into his warmth and strength. "What are you thinking about?" he would ask. "How much has changed?" "How different my life is now." "Better or worse?" She would turn in his arms and kiss him softly. "Immeasurably better. You saved me, Aaron Taggart." "No," he would reply, as he always did. "We saved each other, and it was true." Jane had brought light and warmth to Aaron's solitary life, filling the empty spaces with love and family. He had given her reason to live again, pulling her back from the brink when winter's cold had nearly claimed her. By the time James was 10, Alina was 7, and Thomas was 5. The ranch was one of the most successful in the region. Aaron had proven himself a skilled rancher and businessman, and Jane had become the heart of not just their home but the wider community. She often thought about that desperate girl who had walked into the general store looking for any kind of work, any reason to keep going. Sometimes it seemed like a different person, someone she had been in another life. The woman she had become was strong and confident, secure in her place in the world. One spring afternoon, Jane took the children on a picnic up into the hills overlooking the ranch. They spread a blanket and ate sandwiches while the children played. From this vantage point, she could see the whole valley spread below, the ranch buildings looking small but solid, cattle dotting the green pastures, and the mountains rising blue and majestic in the distance. "It's beautiful, Mama," Alina said, coming to lean against her. "Yes, it is," Jane agreed, wrapping an arm around her daughter. "Will we always live here?" Thomas asked, practical and serious like his father. "I hope so, sweetheart. This is our home." James, the oldest, was standing at the edge of the overlook, looking down at the ranch with an expression Jane recognized. It was the same look Aaron got when he surveyed the land, a mix of pride and fierce devotion. "I'm going to run the ranch someday," James announced. "Just like Papa." "I'm sure you will," Jane said, "and you'll do a wonderful job." As they packed up to head home, Alina found a cluster of wildflowers and picked them for Jane. "These are for you, Mama, because you're the best mama in the whole world." Jane accepted the flowers with tears in her eyes. There had been a time when she thought she would never have children, never have a family, never experience this kind of simple, profound joy. The winter had nearly taken it all from her before she even had it, but the cowboy had made her strong again. He had given her love and purpose and a reason to keep fighting, and together they had built something beautiful and lasting. That evening, after the children were in bed, Jane and Aaron sat on the porch as they did most nights. The spring air was soft and sweet, carrying the scent of new grass and wildflowers. Aaron's arm was around her shoulders, and she was tucked against his side in the way that had become second nature over the years. "The children are growing so fast," Aaron said. James is going to be taller than me soon. He worships you. He wants to be just like his papa. He could do worse." Aaron smiled. "Eleanor has your kindness, and Thomas has your stubbornness. I'm not stubborn. You're the most stubborn woman I've ever met." "It's one of the things I love about you," Jane laughed. "If I'm stubborn, it's only because I learned from you." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. The ranch was quiet except for the occasional sound of cattle lowing in the distance and the soft chirp of crickets. "You ever regret it?" Jane asked suddenly. "Marrying me, taking on the responsibility of a desperate woman who had nothing to offer." Aaron turned to look at her, his expression serious. "Jane Taggart, I have never regretted a single moment of our life together. You think you had nothing to offer. You gave me everything. Love, family, joy. You took this empty house and made it a home. You took my lonely life and filled it with meaning." He cupped her face in his hands. "Marrying you was the smartest thing I ever did." "I love you," Jane whispered, "so much it still sometimes takes my breath away." "I love you too. Always have, always will." They kissed, a soft, lingering kiss full of years of devotion and trust. When they pulled apart, Jane rested her head on Aaron's shoulder and thought about the journey that had brought her here. The winter had stripped everything away, leaving her raw and broken. But from that brokenness had come a strength she never knew she possessed. The strength to keep going, to accept help, to open her heart again even when it seemed safer to keep it locked away. And Aaron had been there every step of the way, steady and patient, giving her space to heal while offering his strength to lean on. He had not tried to fix her or rush her or demand anything she was not ready to give. He had simply been there, solid and true, until she was ready to reach out and take his hand. Years continued to pass in a rhythm of seasons and growth. The children grew into capable, kind young people. James developed his father's ranching skills and love of the land. Eleanor became a talented writer and artist, filling the house with sketches and paintings. Thomas showed an aptitude for numbers and business that promised to serve the ranch well. When Jane turned 40, Aaron threw her a surprise party at the ranch. Half of Deadwood seemed to be there. Friends and neighbors gathered to celebrate. There was music and dancing and a feast that took days to prepare. Jane moved through the crowd, hugging old friends and meeting new ones, overwhelmed by the warmth and affection. Mrs. Patterson was there, the boarding house owner who had once told Jane she could not keep the room. She hugged Jane warmly. "Look at you," Mrs. Patterson said. "I remember when you first came to my boarding house, so thin and sad. I worried about you. And now look. A successful rancher's wife, beautiful children, a wonderful home. You've done well, Jane." "Thank you," Jane said. "And thank you for being patient with me back then, even when I couldn't pay rent on time. I only wish I could have done more to help." Later, when the party was winding down and the guests were departing, Aaron pulled Jane aside. "I have something for you," he said, producing a small wrapped package. Inside was a locket, delicate gold on a fine chain. When Jane opened it, she found two tiny photographs. One was of her father and brother, taken before they left for Deadwood. The other was of Aaron and their children. "I thought you might like to carry them all with you," Aaron said softly. "Your past and your present together." Jane's eyes filled with tears. "It's perfect, thank you." She looked at the photograph of her father and brother, their faces frozen in time, forever young. "They would have loved you, and they would have loved the children so much. I wish I could have met them." "They're with us," Jane said, touching the locket, "in memory and in love that never dies." Aaron fastened the locket around her neck, and Jane touched it gently, feeling the weight of it against her heart. A reminder of where she had come from and how far she had traveled. As the children grew into young adults and began to make their own paths, Jane found herself reflecting more on the journey. She started writing in a journal, recording memories and lessons for her children and perhaps someday her grandchildren. She wrote about the winter that nearly killed her, about the grief and loneliness that had seemed insurmountable. She wrote about walking into the general store that day, desperate and hopeless, and meeting a cowboy with kind eyes who offered her a chance. She wrote about falling in love slowly, like ice melting in spring, layer by layer until she could feel warmth again. About learning to trust, to hope, to believe that good things could still happen even after terrible loss. And she wrote about what she had learned. That strength was not about never breaking, but about having the courage to put yourself back together. That love was not weakness, but the greatest form of bravery. That sometimes the worst moments of your life could lead to the best, if you were brave enough to keep going. James married at 22, bringing home a sweet-tempered girl named Sarah from a neighboring ranch. Within a year, Jane was a grandmother, holding her first grandson and marveling at the continuation of the family line. Aaron built James and Sarah a house on the property, keeping the family close. Eleanor surprised everyone by announcing she wanted to study art in San Francisco. It was Aaron who encouraged her to go, despite his worry. "We can't hold them too tight," he told Jane when she fretted about their daughter leaving. "We raised them to be strong and independent. Now we have to let them fly." Eleanor returned after 2 years, more confident and accomplished, and set up a studio in Deadwood where she taught art to children and created paintings that were increasingly sought after. Thomas took over much of the business side of the ranch, proving to have a shrewd mind for finance and negotiation. Together, he and James made the ranch more successful than ever. On their 25th wedding anniversary, Aaron and Jane renewed their vows in the same small church where they had married. Their children stood with them, along with grandchildren, and the church was packed with friends. Jane wore a new dress, pale blue to match Aaron's eyes, and when she spoke her vows, her voice was clear and strong. "25 years ago, I was lost and broken, and you found me. You gave me hope when I had none, strength when I was weak, and love when I thought I would never feel anything but grief again. You have been my partner, my best friend, my rock. I promise to love you for the next 25 years and all the years after that, for as long as we both live." Aaron's own vows were equally heartfelt, speaking of the joy Jane had brought to his life, the way she had transformed his house into a home and his existence into a true life worth living. "I was lonely before you," Aaron said, looking into her eyes. "I just didn't realize how lonely until you showed me what it meant to have a partner to share everything with. You are my heart, Jane. You always have been, and you always will be." There was barely a dry eye in the church when they kissed, sealing their renewed commitment to each other. The celebration afterward was joyous and lasted into the night. Jane danced with Aaron, with her sons, with her son-in-law, with old friends. She laughed until her sides ached and felt surrounded by love so thick it was almost tangible. As the evening wound down and they prepared to head home, Billy approached. He was older now, his hair graying, but he still worked on the ranch and lived in the bunkhouse he had occupied for nearly 3 decades. "Miss Jane," he said, then corrected himself with a smile. "Mrs. Jane. I just wanted to say thank you." "For what, Billy?" "For making this place a home. For all the meals and the kindness and the laughter. I've had opportunities to leave over the years, go work other ranches for maybe more money. But I stayed because this place, with you and Aaron and the family, it's been more than just a job. It's been a home. You made me part of the family." Jane hugged him tightly. "You've always been family, Billy, always." Similar sentiments came from others throughout the evening. People whose lives Jane had touched with her kindness, her strength, her willingness to help anyone who needed it. She had become a pillar of the community, known for her generosity and compassion. But all Jane could think was that she was only able to give so much because she had received so much. Aaron had poured love into her when she was empty, and that love had overflowed into everything else in her life. As they rode home in the wagon, just the two of them under a canopy of stars, Aaron took her hand. "Happy?" he asked, as he had asked so many times over the years. "Deliriously happy," Jane replied. "Sometimes I still can't believe this is my life." "It is, and it's going to keep being your life for many more years. We're not done yet, Mrs. Taggart." "No," Jane agreed, smiling. "We're not done yet." More years passed, full and rich. More grandchildren arrived, filling the ranch with young voices and laughter. Jane taught them to bake, to garden, to ride, passing on the skills and love she had accumulated over the decades. Aaron's hair turned silver, and lines deepened around his eyes, but he remained strong and vital, still working the ranch alongside his sons, still pulling Jane close every night and telling her he loved her. Jane herself aged gracefully, her dark hair streaked with white, her face lined but still beautiful. She remained active in the community, always the first to help when someone was sick or struggling, remembering her own time of need and determined to ensure no one else felt as alone as she once had. On their 30th anniversary, the family gathered for a photograph. 3 generations stood together in front of the ranch house, the building that had been Jane's salvation, and had become the center of so much love and life. Looking at that photograph later, Jane marveled at how the scared, broken girl she had been was nowhere to be seen. In her place was a woman who had lived and loved deeply, who had built a family and a legacy, who had taken the worst winter of her life and transformed it into a lifetime of warmth. One autumn evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Jane turned to Aaron. "You remember the day we met in the general store, of course. You were looking for work, so thin and scared. I took one look at you and knew I had to help. What made you offer me the job? You didn't know me, I could have been anyone." Aaron was quiet for a moment, thinking. "I saw something in your eyes, pain, yes, and fear, but also determination. You were down, but you weren't broken. Not really. And I guess I recognized a bit of myself in you. I knew what it was like to be lonely and struggling, even if my circumstances were different. I wanted to give you a chance. You gave me so much more than a chance. You gave me a life. We gave each other a life," Aaron corrected gently. "I was existing before you came, Jane. Just going through the motions. You brought meaning and joy and purpose. We saved each other." Jane leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steady beat of his heart. It was true. They had saved each other. 2 lonely people finding connection and love in the harsh landscape of the Dakota Territory. The winter had made her weak, stripping away everything until she was barely a shell of herself. But the cowboy had made her strong again, not by removing her pain, but by giving her a reason to fight through it. He had shown her that loss did not have to be the end of the story, that new chapters could be written even after devastating ones. And together, they had written a beautiful story indeed. As the years continued their steady march, Jane found increasing joy in her role as grandmother and matriarch of the growing family. The ranch remained prosperous under James and Thomas's management, and Alina's artistic career flourished, bringing attention and prestige to the family. Jane started a tradition of family dinners every Sunday, where everyone would gather at the main house for a feast. The table would be crowded with children and grandchildren, laughter echoing off the walls, stories being shared, memories being made. Aaron loved these gatherings, sitting at the head of the table and surveying his family with obvious pride and contentment. Afterward, he and Jane would sit together and talk about how blessed they were, how their life had exceeded anything they could have imagined. "We're going to have great-grandchildren soon," Jane observed one evening. James's oldest daughter was engaged and planning a wedding. "Great-grandchildren," Aaron repeated, shaking his head in wonder. "Did you ever think we'd live to see that?" "I didn't think I'd live to see my 30th birthday when I first came to Deadwood. Every day since then has been a gift." As they moved into their late 50s and then 60s, both Aaron and Jane began to slow down. Aaron handed more and more of the ranch management to his sons, though he still rode out most days to check on things. Jane kept house, though Alina and the daughters-in-law helped increasingly with the heavier tasks. But they remained devoted to each other, their love deepened and strengthened by decades of shared life. They knew each other so thoroughly that often no words were needed, a glance or touch conveying everything. On their 40th wedding anniversary, the family threw an enormous celebration. Friends came from all over the territory, some traveling for days to attend. There was a formal dinner, speeches, toasts, and dancing that lasted well into the night. The mayor of Deadwood gave a speech praising Aaron and Jane as pillars of the community, examples of hard work, dedication, and love. Jane blushed at the praise, but Aaron squeezed her hand and whispered, "He's right. We did good, didn't we?" "We did very good," Jane agreed. Their children presented them with a hand-tooled leather album filled with photographs and written memories from family and friends. Jane paged through it with tears streaming down her face, overwhelmed by the love and appreciation expressed on every page. "I don't deserve all this," she said. "You deserve every bit of it and more," Alina said firmly, hugging her mother. "You've been the heart of this family and this community for 40 years. You've touched so many lives with your kindness and strength." That night, alone in their bedroom, Aaron helped Jane remove the locket she wore every day. He opened it to look at the photographs inside, faded now with age. "They would be so proud of you," he said, touching the image of her father and brother. "Look at the life you've built, the family you've created. You honored their memory by living so fully." "I honored it by not giving up," Jane said, "even when I wanted to. Even when the winter was so cold I thought I'd never be warm again. I honored it by accepting help when you offered it, by opening my heart even though I was terrified. I'm glad you did. I cannot imagine my life without you in it." They lay down together, Jane's head on Aaron's chest, his arms around her. They fit together perfectly, two pieces of a puzzle that had found their match. "You ever wish you'd married someone younger?" Jane asked suddenly. "Someone who could have given you more years?" "No." The answer was immediate and firm. "I married exactly who I was meant to marry. You're my soulmate, Jane, my other half. However many years we have left, they're all I want or need." Jane kissed his chest, right over his heart. "I love you, Aaron Taggart, more than I can ever express in words." "I know. I feel the same way. We're lucky, you and I. Not everyone gets a love like this." They drifted off to sleep in each other's arms, content and complete. The years that followed were gentle ones. Aaron and Jane settled into a comfortable routine, enjoying their family and the ranch without the pressing demands of running everything themselves. They took pleasure in simple things: morning coffee on the porch, evening walks around the property, reading together by the fire. Jane's health remained good, though she tired more easily. Aaron developed a slight limp from decades of ranch work, but refused to let it slow him down too much. They took care of each other, each attuned to the other's needs and moods. When Jane turned 65, She sat down to finish her journal, the one she had been keeping for decades. She wrote a final entry addressed to her children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. My dear ones, if you are reading this, I am likely gone. But I want you to know that I lived a full and joyful life, richer than I ever imagined possible. There was a time when I was young, newly arrived in Deadwood, when I thought my life was over. I had lost everyone I loved, and the winter seemed determined to claim me too. I was weak, broken, ready to give up. But then a cowboy named Aaron Taggart offered me work, and with it, he offered me hope. He showed me that strength isn't about never falling down. It's about getting back up. It's about accepting help when you need it and offering help when you can give it. It's about opening your heart even when you're afraid of being hurt again. Aaron made me strong by believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself. He loved me back to life. And together we built something beautiful. A family, a home, a legacy of love. My wish for all of you is that you find your own Aaron, your own reason to be strong when life makes you weak. That you have the courage to keep going even when everything seems dark. That you open your hearts to love even when it's scary. Life will hurt you sometimes. Winter will come. But spring always follows if you can just hold on long enough. Be strong, be kind, be brave, and most of all, be loving. That's the secret to a good life. With all my love now and always, Jane Eleanor Kendall Taggart. She closed the journal and placed it in the strong box where important family documents were kept, knowing that someday, someone would find it and read her words. Aaron and Jane celebrated their 45th anniversary quietly, just the two of them and their immediate family. They were both in their 70s now, silver-haired and slower moving but still devoted to each other. 45 years, Aaron marveled. It feels like yesterday and a lifetime ago all at once. I know exactly what you mean, Jane said. They were sitting on the porch, the same place they had sat countless evenings over the decades. The view had barely changed, the mountains still rising majestic in the distance, the valley still green and fertile, the ranch still prosperous and well-maintained. But everything had changed too. The scared young woman and the lonely cowboy who had first sat here together were gone, replaced by elder statespeople of the family, weathered by time but strengthened by love. You have any regrets? Jane asked. Aaron thought carefully before answering. I regret that we didn't have more time. That sounds greedy, I know, after 45 years, but I would take 100 years with you if I could, and it still wouldn't be enough. That's not really a regret then, Jane said softly. That's just love. Yes, it is. They sat in companionable silence as the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant colors. Somewhere in the distance, they could hear their grandchildren playing, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. The ranch was alive with family and activity, just as it had been for decades. Jane thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. The desperate winter when she nearly gave up. The chance encounter in a general store. The slow thawing of her frozen heart. The moment she realized she was in love. The marriage, the children, the grandchildren, the great-grandchildren. Every joy and sorrow, every triumph and challenge, all of it woven together into a life rich with meaning. The winter had made her weak, stripping away her defenses and leaving her vulnerable. But that vulnerability had allowed Aaron in. It had let her accept help, accept love, accept the possibility of a new beginning. And the cowboy had made her strong again, not by taking away her pain, but by giving her a reason to carry it. By showing her that she was worthy of love, capable of joy, deserving of happiness even after terrible loss. Together, they had built a legacy that would outlast them both. Children who were strong and kind, who knew how to love and be loved. grandchildren who would carry forward the lessons learned, the values instilled. A ranch that would endure for generations, a testament to hard work and dedication. But more than any of that, they had loved each other. Deeply, truly, completely. And that love had been the foundation for everything else. As the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, Aaron helped Jane to her feet. They walked slowly inside, his arm around her waist, her head resting against his shoulder. They moved with the ease of long practice, each supporting the other, a team until the very end. That night, lying in bed with the window open to let in the cool night air, Jane thought about how far she had come from that desperate girl shivering in a boarding house room. She had been saved not by charity or pity but by love. Real, honest, enduring love. She turned to Aaron, who was already watching her in the dim light. "Thank you," she said simply. "For what? For everything. For finding me when I was lost. For loving me when I couldn't love myself. For 45 years of happiness. For all of it." Aaron cupped her face gently. "You never have to thank me for loving you, Jane. It's been the easiest and best thing I've ever done." They kissed, a soft, sweet kiss full of decades of devotion. And as Jane drifted off to sleep in her husband's arms, she felt at peace. Whatever time they had left, whether it was years or months or days, she had already lived more fully than she ever thought possible. The winter had taken so much from her all those years ago. But in taking everything away, it had forced her to rebuild from scratch. And in that rebuilding, with Aaron by her side, she had created something more beautiful and lasting than what she had lost. She had become strong again. Not because she never felt weak, but because she had learned that true strength came from vulnerability, from admitting you needed help, from opening your heart even when it had been shattered. The cowboy had taught her that. Aaron had shown her, day after day, year after year, that love was the strongest force in the world. Stronger than winter, stronger than grief, stronger than fear. And she had learned the lesson well, carrying it forward through all the years of their life together, passing it on to their children and grandchildren, creating ripples that would extend far beyond her own lifetime. As dawn broke over the ranch the next morning, Aaron and Jane rose to greet another day. They moved slowly through their morning routine, making coffee, watching the sunrise, enjoying the quiet before the ranch came fully to life. "Another beautiful day," Aaron observed. "They're all beautiful," Jane replied, taking his hand. "Every single one we get to spend together is beautiful." And it was true. From that first desperate day in the general store to this peaceful morning 45 years later, every day had been a gift. Some had been harder than others, some filled with challenge and sorrow. But all of them, every single one, had been made beautiful by the presence of love. The winter had made her weak. The cowboy had made her strong again. And together, they had made a life worth living, a love worth celebrating, a story worth telling. As the years wound down and they both grew older and more fragile, Aaron and Jane remained devoted to each other until the very end. They passed away within months of each other in their late 70s, Jane first and then Aaron, as if he could not bear to be without her for long. They were laid to rest side by side in the cemetery overlooking the ranch they had built together, under towering pine trees and vast Montana sky. Their headstone reads simply, "Aaron Taggart and Jane Kendall Taggart, beloved husband and wife, father and mother, grandfather and grandmother, together forever." The family they had created continued to thrive, generation after generation, carrying forward the values of strength, kindness, love, and resilience that Aaron and Jane had instilled. The ranch remained in the family, a living legacy of what two people could build when they found each other at exactly the right moment. And sometimes, On cold winter evenings, family members would tell the story of how it all began. About a desperate young woman and a kind cowboy who offered her work when she needed it most. About how winter had made her weak, but a cowboy had made her strong again. About how one chance encounter in a general store had led to a love that lasted a lifetime and beyond. It became a family legend, passed down through the years, a reminder that even in our darkest moments, even when winter seems eternal and hope seems lost, love can find us. Help can come from unexpected places, and strength can emerge from vulnerability if we're brave enough to accept it. Jane and Aaron's love story became the foundation of their family's identity, a touchstone and inspiration for generations to come. And though they were gone, their love remained, woven into the very fabric of the ranch, the land, and the family they had created together. The winter had made her weak. The cowboy had made her strong again, and together they had made something eternal.